Caroline explained during a brief Zoom meeting that my role no longer fit within their corporate structure. She told me my department was being consolidated. My name's Dustin Hale. I'm 44 years old and serve as the Senior Development Director at Red Forge Technologies based in Boulder, Colorado. For over a decade, I'd been the driving force behind systems and teams that transformed Red Forge from a struggling startup into a respected player in energy solutions. Every major platform we built, every innovative process, I had my fingerprints all over them. When Caroline broke the news, I didn't argue or show any emotion. I simply asked about how the transition would work and signed off, keeping it professional until the very end. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, I found myself in my home office, rereading the non-compete clause in my contract. The language was riddled with loopholes, big ones. It was clear the acquiring company's legal team had been careless, probably assuming employees from a smaller company wouldn't catch or challenge them. That was their mistake. My phone buzzed with another message from Jason, our lead system architect, the fifth engineer to reach out since the acquisition announcement. He wrote, "You were right about the new management. They're gutting the innovation pipeline. Are you still thinking about that project we talked about?" I set my phone down without replying. Not yet. Timing was crucial. The acquisition had been celebrated industry-wide. Triumph Energy Corporation, a Fortune 500 giant, was absorbing our promising startup. The press release sang praises about our complementary skills and shared vision. Caroline Vega, the newly appointed CEO for our division, had promised minimal disruption and assured, "We value the talent that built Red Forge." Those were empty words. Within just 8 days, the first layoffs hit. I opened my laptop and reviewed the business plan I'd been refining for months, not because I was certain I'd be fired, though I had my doubts, but because I'd noticed the company's trajectory shifting even before the acquisition. Executives were chasing quarterly numbers instead of innovation. When Triumph made their offer, our leadership practically stumbled over themselves to accept it. That eagerness should have been the first red flag. In the kitchen, I poured a cup of coffee and stared at the whiteboard mounted on my wall. It listed Red Forge's top clients, their pain points, and the solutions our team had crafted. Solutions soon to be torn apart by people who didn't understand them. Below the clients' names was a list of 5 engineers, the sharpest minds at Red Forge, people I'd personally mentored, who were now quietly asking me what came next. I hadn't given them an answer yet because my plan wasn't ready, but it would be soon. I joined Red Forge when it was just 11 people working out of a converted warehouse. Harold Thompson, the founder, had a bold vision to revolutionize commercial energy monitoring systems, but lacked the technical know-how to make it happen. I built that technical framework and our first viable product, working 80-hour weeks while my marriage quietly fell apart under the pressure. "You're married to that company," my ex-wife said during our last fight. She wasn't wrong. For over 10 years, I turned down offers from bigger competitors with better pay and benefits because Harold made me feel valued. "This is your company too, Dustin," he'd say. "We didn't have formal equity agreements, a mistake I regret now, but loyalty would be rewarded when we succeeded." Then, 3 years ago, Harold's health declined, and his son Tyler took over. Tyler had an MBA from a prestigious school, but none of his father's passion. He focused on making Red Forge attractive for acquisition instead of building something lasting. The culture shifted. Quarterly metrics replaced innovation goals. When I raised concerns at executive meetings, Tyler would nod politely and say, "We'll circle back to that, Dustin." But we never did. 6 months ago, I overheard Tyler in the conference room with 2 Triumph executives discussing which teams would be redundant after the acquisition. My department topped that list. That night, I started sketching what would become the blueprint for Pinnacle Dynamics, a new company based on everything Red Forge was abandoning. I kept my plans quiet, kept performing at my best, and waited. If they wanted to keep me, I'd stay loyal. If not, I had a backup ready. The first real sign my job was at risk came when Caroline set up individual meetings with every department head except me. Then I was cut from strategic planning emails. Finally, Matthew from HR asked for a quick chat about my team structure. Still, I updated documentation, trained junior engineers, and did my best to be indispensable, or so I thought. 2 days before I was let go, Caroline requested access to my project archives and development roadmaps. I handed over everything promptly and thoroughly, professional to the very end. The Zoom call itself lasted exactly 7 minutes. She didn't know that while she was explaining my transition package, I was already texting Jason. Time to talk about that project. Dinner at my place tomorrow, 7 p.m. 5 engineers showed up. Each had the same story. Sidelined by new management, innovations shelved, concerns ignored. They were waiting for someone to build something better. What truly confirmed it all was Caroline's first company-wide presentation. 6 weeks after the acquisition, with 47 people already laid off, she stood on the same stage that once celebrated our technical achievements and unveiled Triumph's integration plan. Red Forge's systems will be phased out over 18 months, she announced, as we transition to Triumph's enterprise architecture. The architecture she mentioned was at least 3 years outdated. Our team had developed those solutions precisely because Triumph's framework couldn't meet modern client demands. Now, they were scrapping our innovations to force-fit their old system. I watched the remaining engineers exchange looks. They understood exactly what this meant. Years of work erased, client needs ignored. The very innovations that made Red Forge valuable enough to be acquired would be dismantled. During the Canda, I stayed silent. I didn't challenge Caroline's claims about synergies and economies of scale. Instead, I noted who nodded along and who stared at their notebooks, avoiding eye contact. After the meeting, I went to my car in the parking garage and sat there for nearly an hour, engine off, thinking. This wasn't just about losing my job. It was about watching something I helped build being deliberately destroyed by people who didn't understand its worth. That evening, I powered up my laptop and put the finishing touches on the business plan I'd been crafting. What started as a backup idea was quickly becoming reality. I set up a secure messaging group with the 5 engineers who had come to my place after my termination. If you're serious about building something better, I have a proposal. Discretion is key. Every one of them replied right away. For the next 3 weeks, we met in the evenings at my house. Together, we pinpointed the flaws in Triumph's strategy, uncovered the opportunities they were overlooking, and identified which clients would likely be unhappy with the upcoming changes. We outlined precisely what made Red Forge's system superior, and how we could push those advantages further without breaching intellectual property laws. Using my severance pay, I rented a small office and filed the paperwork to officially launch Pinnacle Dynamics. The name was chosen deliberately to symbolize rising above what Red Forge had become. The day after I received my final paycheck from Triumph, Tyler Thompson sent me a message. "Heard you might be starting something. We should talk before you do anything rash." I didn't reply. There was nothing to discuss. The window for negotiations had closed weeks ago, back when Caroline decided my 12 years of hard work didn't fit their corporate structure. Instead, I sent a different message to my core team. Office secured, legal documents signed, timeline accelerated, ready to resign tomorrow? Within minutes, a chorus of 5 variations of yes came back. I closed my laptop and glanced at the framed photo on my desk, the original Red Forge team from 12 years earlier. Harold with his arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning proudly at our first working prototype. "This one's for you, Harold," I whispered. "We're going to build it right this time." 3 months after launching Pinnacle Dynamics, we landed our first big client, Vestral Manufacturing, a mid-sized production plant that had relied on Red Forge systems for years. Their operations director, Anthony, had worked closely with me, customizing solutions to fit their energy management needs. Triumph's integration team just doesn't get our requirements, Anthony said during our pitch. They keep trying to force us into their standard package. We showcased our new platform built on Red Forge's core principles but with major enhancements. Anthony signed the contract that very day. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from Triumph Energy's legal department accusing us of breaching the non-compete agreement and stealing proprietary information. They demanded we cease operations immediately and threatened to sue. I'd anticipated this move. Our attorney, Eleanor Winslow, reviewed the letter and confirmed my suspicions. Their non-compete was vague and overly broad, citing energy management solutions generally. And they had no proof of stolen proprietary data because there was none. Still, taking on a Fortune 500 giant in court would drain our limited resources fast. I decided to confront the issue head-on and requested a meeting with Caroline. She agreed, probably thinking I'd be intimidated. We met at Triumph's gleaming downtown office, the Red Forge logo now just a small corner decal in reception. "You understand this can't continue," Caroline said as soon as we sat down. "Your company directly competes with technology you helped develop while employed here. The technology I helped develop is being phased out according to your own integration roadmap," I replied calmly. "And my non-compete specifically prohibits use of Red Forge's proprietary systems, which Pinnacle doesn't. Our architecture is built from the ground up." Caroline's face tightened. "Regardless, you've violated the spirit of the agreement, and you've poached our employees, former staff who left voluntarily after the acquisition and changed roles." She leaned in. "Dustin, let's be practical. Triumph has nearly unlimited resources for litigation. You? What? 3 months of operating capital? Why put yourself through that? We could bring you back as a consultant during the transition. 2-year contract. Excellent pay." There it was, the trap. They didn't want me back. They wanted to tie me up legally while neutralizing any competitive threat. "I appreciate the offer," I said, standing up, "but I'll take my chances with Pinnacle." That afternoon, Triumph escalated their efforts. They contacted Vestral Manufacturing and 2 other potential clients, warning them of possible legal trouble with Pinnacle's technology. Anthony called me immediately. "They're threatening to audit our current systems and void our maintenance contracts if we work with you," he said, frustration clear in his voice. "We can't risk that disruption now." Within 24 hours, we lost all 3 prospects. Suddenly, our runway shrank from months to weeks. That evening, the team gathered in our cramped office. Faces were tense as they looked to me for guidance. "They're playing hardball," I acknowledged, "but they're making a strategic mistake." I pulled up an email I'd received that morning from Harold Thompson, Red Forge's original founder. He'd been quietly watching the acquisition unfold from retirement. "Dustin," he wrote, "I've been following everything. Triumph didn't just buy Red Forge's technology. They bought its problems too. Call me. I think we can help each other." I looked around at the team. Triumph is so focused on crushing us that they're ignoring their own integration. We know Red Forge's architecture weaknesses better than anyone. Harold says they're already seeing system failures with key clients. Jason nodded slowly, realization dawning. "And those clients will need solutions. Fast." "Exactly," I said. "They're trying to bury us in legal threats while their tech foundation crumbles. We don't have to fight them head on. We just need to be ready when their clients start looking for alternatives." That meeting with Harold changed everything. We met at his lake house outside Boulder, away from corporate eyes. At 72, he moved slower than in our working days, but his mind was still sharp. "They didn't just buy Red Forge for the technology," Harold said, spreading documents across the dining table. They bought it for the client contracts, especially Meridian Energy Group. Meridian was our largest client, a regional utility serving 3 states. Their contract alone made up 30% of Red Forge's annual revenue. What Triumph doesn't understand, Harold continued, is that Meridian's infrastructure is unique. Their grid management system was extensively customized. You led that project, Dustin, he said. I nodded. 4 years of development, nearly burned out my whole team getting it right. Harold slid a confidential memo across the table. Internal communications from Triumph were leaked by a board member who remained loyal to Harold. They were promising Meridian a seamless integration, all while planning to force them onto Triumph's standard architecture. The timeline was completely unrealistic. The memo laid out a 6-month migration schedule for a system that had taken us 4 years to develop. Even worse, it dismissed Meridian's specific needs as unnecessary customizations that could be standardized. Harold spoke quietly. Meridian's CEO doesn't know yet, but once implementation begins and the limitations become obvious, I finished for him. They'll face service disruptions, maybe even regulatory problems if they can't meet required reporting. Exactly. And here's what Triumph doesn't realize, Harold continued. The contract I negotiated with Meridian includes performance guarantees, hefty penalties if the system drops below 99% uptime. That was news to me. Triumph hadn't just bought Red Forge, they'd inherited obligations they couldn't possibly meet. No wonder they were so aggressive in trying to shut down Pinnacle. They feared we'd approach Meridian before their integration failures became public. But there was more behind Harold's involvement, a personal edge. I asked directly, "Why are you helping us? Triumph paid you well for the acquisition." Harold's gaze hardened. They did. Then they used clauses in the agreement to devalue the final payment because of integration costs. Tyler didn't understand what he was signing. The deal that made headlines. We received about 60% of the promised sum, and my son's stake was wiped out completely. There it was. Triumph had manipulated the acquisition to pay less than promised using complex financial tricks Tyler hadn't noticed. They hadn't just discarded the Red Forge team. They'd cheated the founders, too. I asked, "Does Tyler know you're talking to me?" Harold shook his head. Tyler took a position with Triumph's corporate development team. He believes he's being groomed for executive leadership. His voice carried a father's disappointment. He'll learn, eventually. Driving back to Denver, a new clarity settled in. This wasn't just about my firing or Triumph's poor decisions. It was systematic corporate predation, identifying smaller companies with valuable client relationships, acquiring them under false pretenses, stripping out what they wanted and discarding the rest. The engineers they fired, the calculated losses, the broken promises, the ruthless negotiation tactics, the technologies dismantled, all inconvenient complications to be swept aside. I pulled into my driveway and sat quietly for several minutes, digesting the full weight of it. Then I called Jason. "Contact the team. Meeting at the office tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to speed up development of our Meridian-compatible system, and I need you to pull every piece of documentation we have on their grid architecture." "Are we going after Meridian?" Jason asked, his voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "Not yet," I said, "but we'll be ready when they start looking for help. And trust me, it'll be sooner than Triumph expects." We had 8 weeks to prepare for Meridian's inevitable crisis. The team worked tirelessly, building a platform that could smoothly interface with Meridian's existing infrastructure while delivering the improvements they'd soon desperately need. I kept a cautious distance from Meridian's executives, knowing Triumph was likely monitoring any contact. Instead, I focused on strengthening our capacity and building an evidence base. We documented every public failure in Triumph's integration process, creating a thorough analysis of where their approach was fundamentally flawed. Meanwhile, Harold activated his industry contacts. Without directly mentioning our strategy, he started raising questions at energy sector conferences about the challenges of forced system migrations. The conversation was happening exactly where we needed it, in professional circles where Meridian's technical leaders were listening. 5 weeks into our preparation, the first major crack appeared. Triumph began the first phase of migrating Meridian systems and immediately ran into problems. 3 substations experienced monitoring failures, causing gaps in regulatory compliance data. Meridian's Chief Technology Officer, Vanessa Powell, publicly called the issues expected transition challenges. But privately, according to Harold's sources, she was furious. 2 weeks later, a second phase caused a 4-hour blackout in reporting across a whole service region, escalating the situation. Meridian formally issued a deficiency notice to Triumph, triggering the contract's performance guarantee clauses. Triumph's response was revealing. They blamed inherited architectural limitations from Red Forge and began crafting a narrative to void the guarantees by claiming the original system was defective. That was the opening we needed. I drafted a detailed technical report showing how the failures stemmed not from Red Forge's original architecture, but from Triumph's incompatible integration. Harold personally delivered the document to Vanessa Powell. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. Coffee tomorrow, 2 p.m., Westside Rowers. It was simply signed VP. At the cafe, Vanessa was already seated in a corner booth and got straight to the point. "Your analysis matches our internal findings," she said quietly. "Triumph is forcing us into their system to avoid maintaining our customizations. The regulatory risks are unacceptable." "You have options," I replied cautiously. "Do I?" she asked. "Our contract with Triumph is binding. Breaking it triggers penalties exceeding our entire tech budget. Unless Triumph is materially breaching the contract through performance failures," I suggested, "which your legal team is likely exploring now." Vanessa smiled slightly, confirming my guess. "We'd still need an immediate alternative. Regulatory reporting can't wait for a vendor selection process." I slid a flash drive across the table. "This contains a technical overview of Pinnacle's platform. It was built specifically to address your issues. We can deploy in 3 weeks with zero regulatory disruption." She pocketed the drive without looking at it. "Triumph claims you violated non-compete agreements." "They've made that claim, yes," I said, "but their legal position has major weaknesses, which our counsel has documented." I offered a second flash drive. "This is our attorney's analysis. Your legal team will find it enlightening." Vanessa nodded once. "I'll be in touch." 2 days later, Triumph announced an emergency stabilization plan for Meridian Systems, effectively admitting their integration approach had failed. Their stock price dropped 8% by market close. That same evening, an official request for proposal landed in my inbox from Meridian Energy Group. They had bypassed their usual procurement channels by invoking emergency provisions. I immediately gathered the team. "This is our moment," I told them. "Meridian needs a solution right now, and we've built precisely what they require. Everything we've been working toward hinges on this proposal." Jason looked around at our small but resolute group. "Should we be worried about how Triumph will react when they catch wind of this?" I shook my head confidently. "They've created their own problem. Now they have to sit back and watch us solve it." The Meridian board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Thursday morning. By 10:45, my phone rang. Vanessa spoke without beating around the bush. "Unanimous approval. Contract execution fast-tracked. Implementation starts Monday." Within the hour, our attorney confirmed the contract was clear of any hidden clauses or legal traps. Meridian agreed to pay our full implementation fee plus a maintenance contract for 3 years. The financial terms were strong enough to guarantee Pinnacle's stability for years ahead. Even more crucially, the contract included an explicit indemnity clause shielding us from any legal action Triumph might pursue. Meridian's legal team had thoroughly vetted our position and agreed. Triumph's non-compete claims were unlikely to withstand serious legal scrutiny. The news quickly rippled through the industry by mid-afternoon, sending Triumph stock tumbling another 12%. Their legal department fired back immediately, filing for an emergency injunction to block our contract. The hearing was set for Monday morning, coinciding with our planned implementation kickoff. When we arrived at the courthouse, Triumph fielded 4 attorneys, led by their chief counsel. Caroline sat just behind them, her face taut with restrained fury. The judge swiftly reviewed the papers before looking straight at Triumph's lawyers. Your non-compete agreements appear to restrict use of proprietary Red Forge systems, yet evidence shows Pinnacle developed independent technology. Moreover, Meridian's filing establishes an urgent public interest in maintaining reliable utility services. She then denied the injunction on the spot without further discussion. As we exited the courtroom, Caroline stepped in front of me in the hallway. "This isn't finished," she warned softly. "Triumph never loses." I met her gaze firmly. "This isn't about winning or losing, it's about creating something that works." I moved past her toward my team waiting nearby. Together, we left to begin the implementation that would safeguard both Meridian's systems and Pinnacle's future. That quiet victory felt deeply satisfying. 18 months later, Pinnacle Dynamics had expanded to 27 employees and occupied an entire floor in a downtown Boulder building, overlooking the very mountains that had witnessed both my professional downfall and resurgence. The Meridian rollout was flawless, completed ahead of schedule with zero downtime or service interruptions. Word spread quickly throughout the industry. Within a year, 4 additional major clients transitioned onto our platform. Triumph eventually dropped their legal attacks, shifting focus toward damage control within their energy division. Caroline Vega was quietly reassigned to a subsidiary in another state. Tyler Thompson moved on to a startup incubator, undoubtedly wiser from the ordeal. Harold occasionally visited our office, pride unmistakable as he observed a vision reborn. Though he never formally joined Pinnacle, his mentorship remained invaluable. On the 2nd anniversary of my firing, I received an unexpected email from the person who had hired me at Red Forge 12 years earlier. "You built something better than we ever could have," he wrote. Many of us had sensed this coming, but were powerless to stop the acquisition. "Some victories," he added, "just require time." I closed my laptop and walked into the conference room, where the team was celebrating the completion of a new module. These were no longer just co-workers. They were partners who had taken the same leap of faith I had, believing that competence and integrity would eventually outpace corporate politics. Later that night, I stood alone on my home deck, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The bitterness of betrayal had softened, replaced by an unexpected feeling: gratitude. Without Triumph's arrogance, without Caroline's dismissal, Pinnacle might never have existed. I hadn't merely reclaimed my career. I had created something far more aligned with my values than Red Forge ever could have become under Triumph's reign. Sometimes being pushed out of the wrong place is exactly what you need to find the right one.